I'm the chief drama critic of the Daily Chronicle.
Jimmy Erskine's never liked me.
Hold your breath for he is theatrical sewage.
It's a disaster. You should talk to him.
Over the last 10 years, you've compared me to livestock, creatures of the sea, and an extinct bird. It's going to stop.
Oh, are you retiring?
You know, it slightly fell in my lap as an act of football nepotism because, and the reason being, I played football for about 25 years with the same group of old men. The game was started by Patrick Marber, who is the the screenwriter, and Anthony Quinn, who wrote the novel, is a founding member of that game. And ironically enough, of course, Mark Strong is also a member of our ancient squad of creaky people. So, you know, I think what had happened was that Patrick had through a producer, Jolien Simmons, he'd optioned the book, got Patrick to write the screenplay, and Patrick loved Tony's book, but I think but it was the world and a particular character that had particularly appealed to Patrick. So he's extrapolated a kind of story that runs to the side of the universe in the book, if you like. And then in 2019, I think a few years after they'd got going on the project, he just called me up and said, would I be interested in having a look and a read and maybe taking it on? And of course, I just said yes, because, you know, I'm a huge admirer of his work, of course. And, you know, he's such a brilliant writer. And B, you know, we were pals, and I you know, I really respect him. And I think he's such a fine writer. So it wasn't hard. I didn't have to go hunting for it, which has never happened before in my life, let me just tell you. Sorry. That's a very good question, Glenn, and I can see because you are a very dapper dresser, unlike me. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we all have a 1930s London in our imagination, from which we've received from films and movies of the time and since, which are all in their way kind of, you know, made up, right? So initially, I think I went back to a whole series of photographs from the time. And, you know, the main thing that strikes you, first of all, is how there's no cars anywhere, right? So everything is empty. It's empty. And also it's very minimal because it's empty. Like there's no sign, you know what I mean? It's really minimal. So that was the first thing that struck me, which was useful because obviously we had 5 weeks, really an independent budget. And so trying to create a world that was believable on that budget would require a lot of skill. And so I thought, okay, minimal, we'll go the least we can in each frame. And everything that will be in a frame will have to do a lot of work to suggest more. So that's why the lampshades, whatever, each thing was very carefully chosen. But then obviously, you know, and then the other thing I thought, the story and the film, although it is a kind of, at first blush, it's a kind of, you could think it's a British heritage period movie, you know, beautiful people in the theatre in lovely costumes and country houses and all that stuff that we're very familiar with. But it's also it's a movie that at its heart is actually basically a film noir. It's basically Double Indemnity, right? One of the greatest movies. Jimmy Erskine is basically Barbara Stanwyck, and very quickly he figures out who and how he has to persuade to do something difficult for him that ultimately spirals out of everyone's control, you know, and bad things happen, right? It's basically Double Indemnity. And so then that took me to Hangover Square and a whole, you know, Stage Fright, early Hitchcock. So there's a whole series of those kind of noiry British films. But then I also thought, black and white, you know, I feel, there's enough darkness in the film, you know, in the story. And so when you look at Technicolor film of the time, like I looked at lots of just documentary 3-strip Technicolor footage, documentary footage, and the colors are just amazing when you finally see that, you know. And so that's basically all those things came together. I thought, well, we'll make a really dark bright film, if you know what I mean. A dark color noir. We'll try and make it as bright and colorful as we can, but it's also super dark, like dark light. I don't know how to describe it. And the other thing, obviously, was we didn't really have a lot of money, so a lot of it was driven by shit. Okay, we can't actually move the camera that way or that because there's fucking Piccadilly Circus with, you know, everything there, and there's a lot of smoke, a lot of frames that are lit for one side or another quite starkly, a lot of backlight, and placing key things in it that make you think there's a lot more. It's a massive con trick, but I must call out my amazing production designer, Lucienne Seren, who did her and her department, and the costume team, and David Higgs, the DP, because they, I don't know, sometimes it all works. Everyone saw the same thing. And so we had to go really fast, but it all came together. Well, a bit like yours, really. You know, I did Shakespeare at school like you do, and funny enough, Othello too, although I actually played Othello, hard as it is to believe. Marvelous love. If you haven't seen my Othello, you haven't lived. Oh, it's terrible. I'm terrible. I'm like the world's worst actor. But so very much like you, and aware of his presence as a kind of legend, you know, like one of the acting greats alongside Anthony Hopkins and Laurence Olivier. You know, he's the heir to Laurence Olivier, you know, and then I think the next time at Gods and Monsters, well, I remember seeing and being so struck by that, because he hadn't really done, I think Richard III is what he had done first, that had sort of burst onto the screen. And he began that run, didn't he, through the late 90s and 2010s, when suddenly he went from Richard III to Gods and Monsters, and then he was then Gandalf. And it's hard to, what do you do with that? I watched those with my boys as they were growing up. You know, it becomes part of the fabric of the sort of mythology of your life. But it's interesting. It was a few years later. Have you seen a movie he did called Mr. Holmes? I think that's one of my favorite films, and he's my favorite Sherlock Holmes. He is exquisitely heartbreaking in that film. I think it's Laura Linney in it as well. Oh my God, she's incredible. It's a brilliant, brilliant film. If you haven't seen it, just watch it. Put it in your letterbox queue. So you then have a sense that Ian has got all these other colors, you know, anyway, long story short, when he wanted to do this film because of Patrick's script and his relationship with Bill Kenwright, who was financing the film, I guess I was quite trepidatious to go and meet him. You know, who are you going to meet? And here's the thing, I'm really not just saying this. Ian is like really humble. Ian has even more imposter syndrome than you or I have, right? I mean, that's the startling thing. I mean, I walk around all the time thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm doing and I'm going to get found out. But I also have enough part of me as an ego thinks, yeah, I am really good. You know, we all carry that duality with us, right? Ian genuinely has so much humility. He's really scared. Like on the first day on set, he's actually really scared because he thinks he's going to be shit and he doesn't know what he's going to do. And he's not afraid. Here's the best bit of it. A lot of actors feel that, of course, but then they cover up by acting out or you know, it comes out. He's just so honest. It's like, I'm scared. And I don't know, is this right or wrong? And he's prepared to be like super vulnerable with it. And you're like, okay, you very quickly get over Ian McKellen, and you're just with a human being who's trying to do something, who's just trying to do something good, and who's, you know, prepared to be humble and say, I don't know, or sometimes say, oh yeah, that was good, or not, you know, I don't know. It's very disarming, you know. So that's the Ian I have, you know, and it's, you know, he was 83 when we made the movie. He's in virtually every frame. We shot it in 5 weeks. You can only imagine the strain on him, and his energy was unflagging. And having just turned 61 myself and feeling very tired, I think what I will carry with me the rest of my life from Ian is how that ability to be scared and humble in the face of new challenges is what keeps him excited about life and the journey of discovery of what he's doing, right? All that technical stuff he does, it's so ingrained in him that he's able to actually just still be scared and allow it to work and trust it and trust everyone around him. I hope that wasn't too pretentious. I think it's true in his case, you know. He's literally so lovely and so sweet, right? That also you want to sort of take care of him, but you also know that, you know, if he needs to fucking stand up for himself, he absolutely can, but he's prepared to make himself so vulnerable that, you know, there was a sense that, and it's awful, the younger, it's a stupid thing, but because he was all, in one ways, the youngest of all of us, but the way he was with all of us, we ended up just being a kind of team, you know, and so we didn't have much time. Everyone just threw themselves at it, really. And yeah, and he made that atmosphere. I've always found on every film, in the end, it's number one on the cast, on the call list that sets the tone and the atmosphere for the film. It just does, you know. And if I tell you that it was a bit like a, you know, Friday morning kickabout with a group of friends, having a laugh, and sometimes getting a little bit carried away, you know, but still then being able to hug and make up afterwards. It was a bit like that because of him.
How on earth do you live with yourself? Please, this is only the beginning.